the drone gets to a health facility where it has to scoop down and open up the drop mech, then it gets a bit complex because you are going to fly as low as 25 meters AGL. And if you want to do that, then you have to be concerned with the trees, the telecom towers, the buildings, and any other potential obstacle that the drone can crash into. And so at that level, we need a finer resolution data set. And so in Africa, we mostly resort to UAV surveys. So we either would contract a UAV surveyor to go and then survey the location, and then we process the data to make elevation maps. And from there, we are able to tell the nature of the terrain, and then that informs on route planning at the health facility. We also use some form of LiDAR data, but that is largely in regions where they are available. And in Africa, more often than not, they are not readily available. So we stick to the SRTM data, and then we pair that with the UAV data set. Once we get the elevation data sets that we need, we have to validate the data sets to make sure that everything is okay before we trust that our drones can fly over them. And the way we validate the elevation data is by um, basically drawing profiles and then comparing them against more trusted data sources. So you can imagine we have um, some data from a health facility that we have surveyed, and we would compare the elevation map against maybe an RTK GPS collection. And once the heights from both data sets agree, then it will be okay, good enough. We say, okay, the height from the UAV data is, let's say, 200 meters in ellipsoidal height. And then the height from the GPS RTK collection is also, let's say, 200.2. In that case, we would say, okay, it is good enough. And so we can trust that data. The way we do that, we have an in-house tool. Yeah, we have an in-house tool that we use for comparing the profiles. So you can see in the slide that this is some location, and then we are comparing the elevation map in that location to another elevation map. And these charts, we are able to get like differences, right? So if we have a threshold of 8 meters, if the difference is more than 8 meters, then that will be our cue to reject that data. And we have instances where we have to ask the surveyor to go back and then resurvey because they did not get the right type of data, or the data that they gave us was not up to the accuracy standards that we need. We also do a lot of obstacle sourcing. So because the drones are flying autonomously, we need to know about any obstacle that is within the area they are flying. And I mentioned that when the drone is in transit, we are flying around 400. The ceiling is 400 feet or 121 meters. And in that instance, you are not so concerned about obstacles. But when we get to the health facility where we are scooping, then we want to make sure that we are capturing all the obstacles. So in this case, we collaborate with ATC, and then NCA in Ghana, National Communications Authority. We work with these two bodies, and then we get obstacle data from them. So you can imagine ATC giving us like all the towers they have. NCA also like would come in with all the towers that they have, the telco towers that they have. We also leverage open data sources like OpenCell ID, where we are able to source some of these obstacle data. And we acknowledge that in our part of the world, you don't always have the best data available, or even the data that you get from these agencies. Sometimes it comes and it has its own accuracy issues, and so we have to do more to make sure that the data is good. And one of the approaches we use is deploying a machine learning model. So we have a model that we have trained on tower detection, and we basically would run all of the survey data that we get through the model, and the model is able to identify towers. Once we identify the towers, we are able to annotate them, and it ends up in what we are seeing in this screenshot here. We also do deploy people to sometimes go in onto the field to collect data. So you can imagine like something like a survey device, sometimes like a static survey device, or even an RTK survey device that people are deployed and then they go to these locations. We use that when we don't have the UAV survey available, and we have people go over to the health facility, and then we give them what we are looking for. So we tell them, if you see a cell tower, we want you to collect the coordinates. If you see a power line, we want you to collect the coordinates. They gather all of that data, send it to us, we validate the data, and then we ingest it into our database for route planning. We also need to know about the keep outs and then the keeping zones. So a keep out is basically an area where a zip is prohibited from flying into. And then the opposite is an area, the opposite being a keeping is an area where a zip is kind of like confined to. So you're not allowed to fly out of. So a keep out zone can be an airport, a helipad, or an airspace, right? And then the keeping is something that internally we use to deconflict. What I mean by that is, I think when I showed the earlier slide, trying to find it quickly. Yeah, in here, so you can see that there's some overlap, right? And then we have a bunch of zips that are launched from this distribution center, and then a bunch of them are launched from this one too as well. We need to find a way to make sure that drones from different distribution centers don't clash. And so the way we do that is by having a keeping zone. So you can say that each of these circles uh, can be a keeping, and then that would prevent a drone from here from getting out of that. And that's also one of the things that GIS does. Um, moving on, talked about, yeah. So for keep outs, I mentioned the airports, the helipads, and then the airspace. The airspace also defines the ceiling, right? So if you are using the airspace, you have to be mindful of other users. So there can be an actual, like a manned aircraft, and you don't want to fly too high to, you know, clash with a manned aircraft. And that's where the ceiling becomes useful. So the ceiling is how we are able to tell our zips that, hey, you are not supposed to fly above 400. And like I mentioned earlier, we work with GCAA, so they tell us like areas where we are not supposed to fly. Some of the example areas are potential military activities. So sometimes they would say, okay, we have a military activity that will be happening in location X, and because of that, we don't want you guys to be flying in that area. We would introduce what we call a TFR, temporary flight restriction, and that will be a keep out that will prevent our drones from flying over those locations. There are things like national parks and prisons where obviously they wouldn't be comfortable with our drones flying over. So in this shot we can see a distribution center right at the heart of what we call a graph. The graph is how we are able to get from location A to location B. So we start out by generating these graphs, And all what is happening at this point is, with all the data that I have spoken about, we cram them into a database, and then we have a starting point, and then we run an RRT star algorithm, um, which is very popular in the field of robotics. And what that is doing is it's a search algorithm. So it is trying to find a way from the start location to a destination that you have given it, while respecting a bunch of constraints. So in this case, the constraints are the keep outs and the ceiling and all of the things that we spoke about. So you notice for each of the keep outs, these are the keep outs. Um, the graph is not flying over it, it is respecting it. You will notice that it will never go across the keep out. Of course, we do get very special requests sometimes from our customers, and then we work with the regulator, in this case, Ghana Civil Aviation Authority, that hey, we have facility ABC in this keep out zone that you have given us, but it looks like it's very critical that we are able to serve them. And so, do you mind looking at the data and the case that we are making for this facility, assessing the risk and making a decision? So they assess the risk, and if it makes sense, if the risk is worth it, then they can decide that yes, we you are allowed to fly into this keep out zone. Those sort of flights would come with extra scrutiny, if I can call it, because we have to communicate constantly with ATC uh, about the location of our zips, when we are flying, at what height we are flying, just to make sure that we are de-risking any collisions with other airspace users. All right. Defining the ceiling. So the way we are able to define the ceiling, I mentioned that we are flying roughly 400 above ground, 400 feet above ground. The way we are able to do that is with the elevation map that we have. So let's think of um, the SRTM data that we have. We take that and we are adding 400 feet to it. But it turns out it's not as simple as just taking your elevation data and then adding 400 feet to it. If you do that, then you end up with what we have here. So this one here is the ground, right? And then if you do some raster calculation and say, okay, take my raster file, add 400 feet to it, then you're going to end up with something like this. And when you do that, it becomes challenging for a drone to traverse, because now it is forced to follow the terrain. So if the terrain is very hilly, then you imagine it goes up to follow the terrain, goes down, goes up, goes down. And the more you are doing these up and down turns, you are losing energy. And so it's not very efficient for especially for fixed wings. And so what we do is we apply some focal statistics, and in a raster file, we take each pixel, buffer it out by 600 meters or 2000 feet. And then once we have that layer is when we add the 400, and that will get you to something like the red layer here, right? So now it follows the terrain more smoothly, and when a drone is flying it like, yes, it is trying to follow the terrain, it's not, but it's not as steep as without the terrain smoothing. All right. Let's delve into route planning and validation. So, to quickly go through a few of the route rules, uh, what do we call a good route? A good route, first of all, has to be safe. So it has to be one that is avoiding obstacles, keep out high population density areas, and then it also has to maintain a safe altitude. So it shouldn't be going above 400, or it shouldn't be flying too close to the ground. It also has to have segments and turns that are within the limits of the vehicle's performance. So You don't want to have a route that is going straight and then it makes a sharp 90. If it turns at 90, obviously the drone cannot make that turn at the speed that is traveling. And it is traveling around, it's doing about 28.7 meters per second. So it is very fast. So with that speed, you cannot make some turns. And so we want to make sure that we are checking all of that. It has to be regulatory compliant. So it is respecting all the keep outs that we spoke about. And we also have the concept of hard and soft keep outs. Um, a brief overview of that is hard keep outs are keep outs where a zip is never allowed to go into. And then soft keep out is in critical situations a zip can get into. So you can imagine a situation where we have a zip or one of our drones flying, and then they have ADSB on board, so they are able to hear other aircraft. So there's a helicopter also flying near it. It hears that there's a helicopter coming towards me. It can make a decision to route around the helicopter. And in a case where maybe there's a keep out, like a school, it is allowed to fly over the school in that point in time or at that point in time, just because the risk of avoiding a helicopter crash uh, is much better than um, flying over a school, right? So that's the soft end and the hard keep outs. And then it has to be efficient. So we are trying to get to customers. Mind you, it's like medical supplies that we are delivering. So we want to make sure that we are getting to our customers as quickly as possible. And so we are always choosing the most optimized path to get to the destination. And then we are thinking about the battery too. So before we launch ASIP, we do some simulations and we make sure that we are able to get from the distribution center to the the health facility and then back. And once that simulation passes is when we say that, okay, this route in terms of energy optimization is good and we are allowed to fly it. For data driven, we want to build our routes using the most accurate obstacle data, terrain data, and then population data. And then we continuously refine the data through field validation and then operational feedback. This is a demo for how we do the route planning. So on the left side of the screen, what we have here is the DSM or digital surface model, which has been developed after we have surveyed the site. So the health facility, I think this example is KCCR, which is in Ashanti region. So the survey that was carried out is this box that we are seeing, and we have what we call a racetrack. So this is where the zip will actually go down and then be able to make a delivery. The red line we are seeing here is what we call the scoop, like I mentioned, and that's where the zip would scoop down. On the right, you can see it in 3D. So this is like a GIS operator zip line, basically uh, uh, going about route planning for this KCCR site. And so you can see that all the obstacle layers that we saw, those are the blue layers that we see here, right? And then the elevation map that we talked about too. And then if there's a keep out zone, you are able to see the keep out. So basically bringing all the different data that we have created into one space to help make somebody who is planning a route make a good decision about, okay, is it good for me to orient the racetrack this way or the other? All right, we are going to take a minute to watch a demo for how planning is done for a route. Right, so I'm going to give the commentary here. We have what we call the collisions check. That's one of the most important things because the drone is autonomous, it's flying by itself. You want to make sure that you have looked ahead and then you have de-risked collision. So the way we are doing that is by this collision check. And what that does is it looks at the elevation map we have for that area. So in this case, it's a digital surface model that was derived from the survey, and it is computing for we call the lines that make up a route segments. So it is computing for each segment. It takes the segment in space, grabs the altitude of that segment, and then it checks the corresponding elevation on ground, and then it computes the difference. If the difference is less than 23 meters, then the system will flag it that no, we think this is a risk, and then we want the GIS operator who is basically planning that route to look at it. So you can see all these dots here. Um, it's telling you that the route is going through, in this case, this tower. And so it is a risk. And we want you to check it out and then clear that risk before moving on. And then on the right side, sorry, on the left side, we can see this highlighted segment. It basically is the upper map check or the ceiling check. This is flagging to the GIS operator again that, hey, this side of your route is going above the 400 feet that you're allowed, and so you need to make a change, right? So it's a bit of tinkering with the racetrack, changing all the parameters that we have here. So you're able to change where we want to drop the package. In this case, it's a KCCR. So you have the coordinates here. You're able to change the coordinates. You can set the drop height, the height at which the package should be dropped. You can change the heading of the racetrack. You can change the scoop height, the go around heights, and that's how you control how high or low these parts of the racetrack should be. And then we have other parameters like setting the speed and all of that. Once the operator is happy with all the configurations, they can run the collision check, the path geometry check, the intersection check, all the checks basically. And once everything has passed, is when we say that okay, we have our route. All right. In the interest of time, I'll move on. Let's see. Right. Okay. So we once we have a route, even though we have validated it. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we use an in-house tool called Sanderlin for route planning. So even though Sanderlin has confirmed that okay, all the route parameters are passing, we still do the redundancy thing of making sure it's extra safe. So we are going to revalidate even though it has passed, right? So uh, in terms of route validation, we have some parameters that we are looking at. So we want to check for flyability. That is the geometry of the routes. And that is what I talked about earlier when it comes to like the kind of turns in the routes, right? We don't want to make them too sharp so that the vehicle can still make those turns. And then the intersection is the zip to zip communication. So we want to make sure that if two zips cannot communicate, then we are using GIS to separate the altitude at which they are flying to make sure that when they are all in the same location, they don't collide. And then we want to do some terrain checks where we are basically checking the segments against the terrain or obstacles to make sure that there is enough clearance between the route and then the terrain. And then for airspace rules, we want to make sure that we are not flying over a keep out or we are not going across a keep in, and we are still within the regulatory ceiling of 400 feet. And for battery usage, we simulate to make sure that we can go to the health facility, come back with enough battery for recovery, because you don't want the drone flying to the health facility and then maybe going down because it has lost the battery power. Yeah. So once we run this validation, and again, this is also like another in-house tool or the same in-house tool that we use called Sanderlin. Sanderlin is able to basically run all of that automatically, and then it tells you that okay, for all of the different parameters we are looking out for, they have passed. Once it is passed, that is when it allows you to make that route available for our flight operations team to use. Um, this is more about the tooling that we use for each of the steps. So on top here, we have all the different tools, and it corresponds to like each stage. So when we are surveying, we recently developed the technology to use our own drones or zips to survey. So we can fit a camera on a drone. It goes to the health facility. Once it gets to the health facility, it turns on the camera, takes the needed photos, and then we process those photos. And once we process the photos, we're able to generate these artifacts. So the processing is done with drone deploy. And out of that processing, we are able to get images, orthomosaics, and then point clouds. From the point clouds, we use ArcGIS to basically develop the DSM that we saw, the digital surface model that we saw in Sunderland, where GIS operator was planning over KCCR hospital. And then for the raw images that we took during the survey, we ran them through the machine learning model I spoke about. And this machine learning model, it's a YOLO, you only look once model that we have retrained or fine-tuned to be able to catch obstacles that we are interested in. So like towers, power lines, we run the model inference on it, and then we are able to get from that process a GeoJSON file, which basically has XY locations of all the objects of interest. Once we get the GeoJSON, we are able to upload it into a database, and we use PostGIS for our database. And so we upload this GeoJSON to PostGIS or to a database through Sunderland. And in the DSM, for the DSM artifacts that we made, we run it through validation. Again, that is where we are comparing it against some other data sources like some RTK GPS, or even like a previous survey that we trust, to make sure that there are no errors. Once we declare that there are no errors, we ingest that elevation map also into the same PostGIS database. And from there, Sunderland is able to read from that database, and that is how we are able to tell that, okay, if we have a route and the route is at, let's say, 250 meters, Sunderland can check against that same database that has the elevation maps and say, okay, for this route, which is at 250, I checked the database, and then the elevation was, let's say, 200 for that particular point. And so it can do the difference. So 200 and then 250, it gets the difference of 50. And then it says, okay, for 50 meters, for the segment to be 50 meters above the ground, then I think is good. And in that case, it will be a pass. If it checks and then it's like maybe 8 meters above the ground, then it will flag it to the GIS operator that, hey, you have a collision here and you should check it out. Right. So once we do the route planning, which is done with Sunderland, we get out of that the routes, and then from routes we move to a sky map. A sky map is basically a bunch of routes that we have put together, and we ship the bundled routes. So like for a nest like GH1 in Zoom, where we have about 800 plus routes, we would bundle all the 800 routes together, and then we would make a sky map. And then that sky map also goes through another validation. And this validation process is essentially the same parameters that we've talked about. So collisions, geometry, intersections, ceiling, we check all of that again. And if it passes, then we would go on to make a route report. And a route report will basically show all these routes on a map. We pass that map to GCA and their GIS team. They review the map, and then if they find it, if they are comfortable with whatever the data is saying, they give us the approval. Once we get the approval, then we would ship the sky map to the nest, and that is done through Amazon Web Services. So we are using a lot of cloud infrastructure. So we ship it through AWS, and then from there, the flight operations team can have access to the routes, and then they can actually fly to the location. And once they are flying to a location, again, we use some GIS there where we are able to basically monitor how the flights are doing. So we mentioned that they are autonomous, but of course, we want humans to be in the loop, overseeing everything in case something goes wrong. They can take an action. So we do the monitoring with another in-house tool we call Fleet Deck. Right. And this operations monitoring, like I said, we are able to track every flight from when it was launched to when it delivered with our dashboards. We are able to identify locations where there's a high demand or recurring emergencies, right? So that's like GIS again being at the heart of things. We are determining that okay, maybe in uh, Achima districts, they tend to have a lot of orders, and so maybe we should do some form of inventory management. We want to make sure that, okay, if we are getting a lot of orders from this location at certain periods, then we want to make sure that we have enough zips available during that period to serve them. And that's something that GIS does. We also do incident response. So in cases where our drones fly and something happens and it has to deploy a parachute, it will deploy the parachutes and then land safely, but we need to recover the drone, and GIS would come in at that point because GIS is how you're able to tell the last location the drone pinged back to the nest. And then from there, we are able to give guidance on the flight operations. We are able to give guidance for the to the flight operations team, sorry, to be able to retrieve the drone. And then we also use analytics to optimize routes and then improve efficiency and then enhance safety. So you can think of situations where we are collecting a lot of data on our routes, and then we notice that, oh, for this particular location, let's say, I'm sorry if anybody's from Suhum. I've used it so much. Suhum Hospital, we realized that we are flying to it in, let's say, 10 minutes. And then somebody, a GIS person, analyzes that 10-minute route and then also analyzes the drive time from the nest to Suhum and realizes that that drive time is 8 minutes. That tells us that our system is being inefficient. And so we are able to go back to the drawing board and then figure out, a more optimized path to use. So this graphic on the right here is our GH1 Suhum location. And this shows all the 800 plus routes that we have going to all the different health facilities. I put in this QR code here that I'm hoping people can scan with their phones. And this is going to show you like a day in the life of zipline operations, starting from the morning when we open shop to evening when we close. So you'd see again GIS being used in terms of tracking all of the different flights and how the deliveries are made, how the zips are even launched in the first place, and then how they are recovered. All right. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll pause here and then take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Wow. I've really enjoyed this particular session. I didn't even notice time was fast spent. Thank you very much for sharing all these with us. Please, at this point, if you have any questions for him, we can just raise our hands through the chat box and then you'll be called and then you ask your question. Okay, so I've seen Gloria ask a question with text. She's asking if how long um I'm not seeing the question. Okay, how long does the battery last? Yeah, so I think that would be our first question.
Okay,
How
thank
long
you,
does
Gloria.
the battery last? Yeah.
Yeah. The battery it should be able to do roughly 3 hours of flight time as of today.
Okay. Okay. Wow. I hope she's been answered. Personally, I also have a question.
Sure.
How can student researchers and GIS professionals collaborate with Zipline in pilot studies, internships, or applied research projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have a research team. I don't have the contacts right now, but yeah, I can get in touch with you and then connect you with our research team. We do a lot of
Okay.
these collaborations where we work with students working on different project works, and even people who need data in the public health space. They're able to reach out to us, and we are always happy to assist them. So yeah, I can put you in touch with the team responsible for that, and then yeah, you can follow with them.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I saw Philemon's hand up. Okay, there are
Yes,
four people with their hands up. Philemon, please ask your question first.
yes, thank you. And this solid presentation. We thank our facilitator
Mm,
for sharing knowledge with us. Indeed, in fact, I was lost in the presentation, but he was able to bring me back. In fact, it's a wonderful section we had this time, and we are grateful. But there's something I want to find out: the role of GIS in terms of the route. We're looking at the obstacles, keep out areas, and about. I'm still finding it hard, like to look at the role of GIS when it comes to weather factor. I think the presentation was silent on it. Maybe high precipitation or maybe cloudy weather or something of that nature. Whether they can still navigate to deliver the emergency services to the facility. So that's one aspect. And then on the aspect of the monitoring, he also spoke a lot on the monitoring, though he said it operate on its own, but there's still a monitoring mechanism. But I'm looking at does it cover the monitoring mechanism? Maybe some criminals, because looking at the elevation, the height of 400 feet or 100 and something, 20 meters above. So if somebody could harm the zip as it is moving. So I want some clarification on it.
Yeah, thank you. For weather, I would say GIS plays a role in the sense that the science of you determining anything that has location related is essentially GIS, right? So we have some predictive tooling where we are able to monitor weather stations, and then we are able to tell that the weather in this location is maybe windy. And like I said, the zips also have onboard sensors for getting wind speed and all of that. And so when a zip is flying, it is constantly assessing all of that data, and it's actually communicating that data back to other zips that are also in the airspace. So, for example, if we have a zip flying a route, and it realizes that, oh, there's a lot of wind turbulence, it is going to assess the situation, and we have a threshold that it is supposed to make a decision on. So it can decide, okay, maybe the wind speed is 14.4 meters per second, but it is within the limits of my bounds, and I can still push on and fly. So even if it's raining, and so long as that threshold has not been met, it will still keep flying. However, it sends that data back to other zips which may be flying the same route. And those zips too, of course, have their onboard sensors. So while they are also making that same journey, they are also checking. When they realize that, okay, we think that based on the data that the zip ahead has sent, by the time we get there, there might be a threshold breach, so we should go back. So they make that autonomous decision to fail the mission. That's what we call it, a mission failure, and then it goes back to the nest, because we wouldn't want it flying through some weather condition that it cannot withstand and then going down. So in that case, it will go back. So it's an autonomous decision that gets made by the zip based on the data that it is gathering. And this, I think you mentioned something about obstacles. For obstacles, the GIS role there is basically uh, sourcing the data, right? So it's GIS is involved in collecting the data, or when uh, uh, when we survey, we use GIS for planning the survey path, and then once that survey is complete, we use GIS to basically from the survey data, and then ingesting it a GIS thing that we do. And one route planning is also one of the GIS things. I think there was a last question that I.
So apparently there are two more people with their hands up, and I would like for them to ask their questions before we go on to the questions in the chat box. So Gloria, could you please ask your question first?
Yes. Mine is about looking at the time they have to do this flight planning and everything. How long does it take to fulfill a request when a request comes in from a health facility? So within what time are they supposed to do these validation and all these machine learning algorithms for them to know the right path to follow and deliver the item?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the routes are pre-planned or pre-computed. So we do all of the validation, all the routing, everything I spoke about, except for ops monitoring. We do all of that ahead of time. And then we save the routes, and then we deploy the routes to the distribution center. So at the time when a call comes through, or a text message from a facility comes through to the distribution center, that we want uh, blood, or some medical supply, we already have a route that is ready to ship. The QR codes automatically pick the route. We are able to send a package quickly. So I would say from the time when a call comes that say we need this package to facility A, to when the order is actually fulfilled, I would say it's within like 2 minutes. We have like SLAs that we try to meet. So within like two, at most 3-4 minutes, we expect that the package should be out, because we understand that these are emergency situations here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. Please, before we go on to the next person, I would like to acknowledge those of us who are joining from YouTube and would like to tell them that if they want to ask questions, they can equally text it over there, and then we would acknowledge the questions asked, and then Fred can also answer those questions for us. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next person. GS Lawrence, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I've enjoyed the presentation. It's very informative. But then, in all this, there's one thing I've been thinking about. I mean, it looks like everything is well planned. However, you can't leave nature out. Anything can happen. A bird can fly into your drone. Somebody can just throw anything at whatever level into your drone, and accidents can happen. So, what are the mechanisms available for accident response and recovery? Whilst the hospital are waiting for the medicine, maybe in 10, 20 minutes, anything can happen, and a drone may fall during its travel. So, at what mechanism do you have for these circumstances? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So we have an incident response team. We also have a controller at each of the distribution centers who is doing the monitoring. So, like you rightly said, there can be a bird strike on the drone that will make it go down. In that instance, it would deploy the parachute, like I spoke about, and then land safely so there are no fatalities. But we are thinking about the patient who needs that medication, right? So the controller at the nest, it will be their responsibility to assess the incident. And so for each incident that happens, we have different error codes that will pop up. Sorry, that will pop up on the controller's screen. And based on those error codes, they can determine what happened. So let's say if it was a bird strike, it would pop up a very specific error code on the controller side. And then they can determine that, oh, okay, this was a bird strike. They'll do some more analysis and assess the situation. If it was an emergency delivery, then of course we want to quickly follow up with another drone with the same type of medication while we deploy a ground team to drive and then go over to the location to pick it up. Pick up the paralanded drone. We also do work with what we call community champions. So we've partnered with the community, all the communities that we operate in, or even all the communities that we fly over. And so for each incident that happens, we are able to quickly reach out to our community champion and then say, we have an incident in your location. We debrief them on we brief them on what the incident is about. And then from there, we are able to collaborate with them because they are much closer to the situation. So they are able to help resolve things. So let's say if the drone had parachutes landed, they are sometimes able to recover them. And then we give them some form of training on what to do when they get to the scene. So those community champions would be working with incident response team while they are en route to the location of the incident. Thank you.
Okay, Fred. So we have some questions here from the chat box. I don't know if you could answer all of them at once, or we should take them one after the other.
Yeah, let me check quickly.
There are 4 questions so far.
Yeah, I see one from Samuel. Is keep out also known as no-fly zone? Yes, that is correct, 100%.
Yeah, yes. Somebody answered that one
Okay.
during the presentation.
At what speed does the zip fly? That's 28.7 meters per second. Do you have alternate landing areas in case of emergencies during flight operations. Yes, we have the concept of anytime hold. So let's say a zip is flying and we get a call from, let's say, GCA that, hey, we see that your zip is flying in this location. And they know that because they have the same monitoring system that our controllers use. So the ATC, GCA, all our stakeholders, they have the monitoring system and they're able to see in real time where our drones are flying. So if we get a call from them that uh, we see a zip flying in this location and we want you to discontinue flight due to, very uh, specific situation, what we do is we can hold the zip so that the controller at the nest has, even though the drone is autonomous, the controller at the nest has a bunch of options on his control. So he can issue an anytime hold command to the zip. And that would, what that is going to do is going to cause the zip to hold in whatever location it is at and discontinue flight. From there, we can issue more commands like we want you to parachute land. So once it is held, we can cause it to parachute land. We can give it a command like return to nest. So it should discontinue the flight and then return to the nest. So those are the different options that we have. To answer your question specifically about the alternative landing sites, what we do is we are able to identify ahead of time these ALSs, so alternative landing sites, and then we can issue a command from the controller's end to say that go to the nearest alternative landing site. It gets there, and what it does is going to parachute land. Yeah, moving on to the next question. Are there, sorry, what was there another thing?
Yes, let me read it out to you. Are there specifications of drones for particular purposes? What are the procurement procedures if one wants to buy a drone? So there are two questions in one. Are there specifications of drones for particular purposes? And then what are the procurement procedure if one wants to buy a drone?
Okay, that's a great question. So there are specification of drones for, particular purposes. Um, we have one other type, our next generation of drones that I did not speak about because it was outside the scope of this talk. That is for more dense regions. So if you maybe check out our YouTube page, uh, we call it the Platform 2 generation. And that model is a different specification from what we talked about. In terms of purchasing, uh, unfortunately, we do not, offer them for sale, and we are basically like the end users. We produce them ourselves and then we use them ourselves. So we don't offer them for sale. And for the different specs, everything I talked about today is strictly for the medical deliveries. And then for the platform two, it is more of e-commerce. And so we are delivering food or anything that you can get from a convenience store. And it is a product that we launched earlier this year in the US. That's only available in the US for now. Thank you.
Okay, so on to the next question. What are some edge cases you have experienced and how did the team go about resolving them?
Yeah, edge cases, I can speak to the GIS side of things. So even though we have all these validation processes in place, as human as we are, sometimes we can make mistakes, right? So that's why we do a lot of things. We try to automate a lot of our processes. So we are continuously improving and then making sure that, we are catching all the edge cases. But one thing that comes to mind comes to mind now in terms of edge cases would be maybe we validate some elevation data, and one of the very typical sources of errors in the GIS world, you have the wrong datum. And so if your datum is wrong, all the elevation values you are getting will be wrong. So if you think that you are flying at 200 meters, then you might be flying at maybe 190 meters, and that can be a bit dangerous, depending on how where you are flying, and then the offsets that you are getting. So yeah, I can think of a case where we we had one of those issues, and uh, a drone was flying a little bit below where we thought it was. Thankfully, we were able to catch it, and then discontinue the flight, and then we're able to put in more automated checks to prevent that from happening in the future. But yeah, we do have these edge cases every now and then, and when they do, our response is finding a more automated or computerized way of solving the problem. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Fred. Now we have just two hands, which we are going to take, and then we would end the session because our time is fast spent. The rest of the questions, we would answer them later. So, Kokuga, please, could you ask the question first?
All right. Good evening, everyone. So I am coming from the NGO space where I work in the rural communities. So, and most of my questions have been answered already. But regarding the last one, which I had wanted to ask, and that food and others, but it's only to the US, and I believe will soon be in Ghana, right? So, if a community that has no access at all to even the nearest facility that the zip will not be able to fly to, if they don't have access to these facilities, how do you go about that? And how many regions do you operate in at the moment? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all good questions. So I think the first question, you were breaking up for me a bit, but if I got it well, you were asking about areas where we are unable to reach. If a facility calls from an area like that, how are we able to fulfill the order? Did I get you right?
Yes, please. But actually, you mentioned that earlier during your presentation that you deliver to the nearest facility close to the community. But here's the case: this remote area, this rural area, maybe let's say they are on an island. You understand? So how do you get to them?
Oh, okay. So if there is no nearby facility,
Yes, please.
okay. So we are able to fly over water. So if the facility is on an island, it shouldn't be a problem so long as they are within our range. So we can see from this map, we are able to, from Omenako or Suhum, we are able to reach Eche, which is, after the Volta Lake. And then we actually do serve some islands in those locations. But of course, we are not able to reach everywhere. So you can see from the Ghana map that in all these regions, we are unable to cover them. I think this is not in my purview, but uh, we may be looking to expand into those locations. I'm not too sure, because the goal is to ultimately be able to reach everybody, so that your health needs are not based on where you live. We want to make sure that your XY location doesn't affect how easily you're able to access medical care in Ghana. So yeah, we try as much as we can to cover what we can. So for all of these locations, if there's a health facility within our range and it is meeting all the criteria, then best believe that we are serving them. Otherwise, we are going to use the via site like you spoke about. We drop it to the nearest facility, and then they're able to pick up. And if they are out of our range, then that will be like one of those discussions where we expand and add more distribution centers so we are able to reach them.
Okay. GS Justin, could you please go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think before I ask my question, maybe I'll just give try to assist with a question that was asked much earlier. I think the question was asked on the specific drone specifications and what they are used for. I think Frederick did a very good work in answering that. But if you notice, the drones as the Zipline in particular has their drones made specifically for delivery purposes. So do other companies also have drones made for specific use cases. We have some that are made specifically for agric. We have others that are made for construction, survey, all those other stuff. And we have the other ones too that are used for recreational activities, like those that are used for photography and all those other stuff. And in Ghana, GCA actually has a lay down criteria for registering and bringing in drones in Ghana. Every drone that is to be flown or used in Ghana has to be registered and known by GCA. There's a criteria for that, and you can do it either as a private drone, recreational, or commercial use. If it's not registered for any of these purposes and you're using it, it's illegal, and you can be taken on for that. And I think recently GCA has started enforcing that, and some people have been caught in that web already. Yes. I think that's to add to the answer. I think Frederick gave one that particular question. But now my question is, Frederick, what would be the frequency of your surveys? This is a follow-up to the question that Gloria asked earlier, which talked about you doing all these surveys before you have to deliver medications to the communities. How frequent do you do your surveys?
Yeah, we try to thank you for adding to the specification question. Everything that you said was absolutely right, and Zipline actually does go through all the procedures that you spoke about. For your question, we try to survey every 6 months, because we do that because the environment is changing all the time. So you can imagine a route that we have going to some facility, and we fly it, everything is okay, and let's say a month down the line, uh, a tower gets built, or maybe there's a tree or some construction in the path, and in that case we wouldn't know about it. And again, that is something that we rely on our community champions for. They're able to sometimes tell us about these things, but in some few cases you find that we don't get that information quickly enough, and we can collide into the obstacle. So we aim for 6 months, a 6 month survey period. So every 6 months we try to refresh our data with the surveys. But then of course, even before the 6 months, like we are always deploying people to the sites, and then they have static GPS, and then they are collecting these obstacle data, and then continuously feeding that data to us so we can adjust our planning.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Frederick Abalu. You've been very helpful. You've really educated us this evening. Without wasting my time, you've already spent a whole lot of time here. So we'll call on the chairman for the Health and Science Working Group to give us the closing remark, and then we'll take it from there. Chairman
All right,
Tyson.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. And Portia, and as you said, in fact, we never knew time has gone so far. Nice. We've done 1 hour 40 minutes. And once again, I think the presenter need an applause. I think he really needs an applause. You can show up for him with our gestures there. Let's give it up for him. Fred, we are very grateful. In fact, it was really hard to get Fred today because of how they are working. So Fred, we really appreciate it. And in fact, we've all learned new things. We've known some of the technical terms, how from the beginning, how they plan through the route until the drone returned back to base, and that is really good. In fact, he also gave some statistics, so you could see the impact of drones. If you look at the map that he shared, the impact of drones are very great, and we really so you could see that how many lives, that's about 6,000 plus, and 17 million people have been reached with the help of drones. It means we there is a market there for geospatial technologies, which we must take and develop it. Thank you very much. And we also want to thank all the moderators and everyone who came in. The questions, and I think there are 2 or 3 questions. We will take the answer and communicate it to all through the email. The rest, I will leave it to Portia, and Portia will give announcements regarding the recordings. And thank you very much. Portia, take over.
Thank you very much, Chairman GS person. So we have come to the end of this session. Thanks be to God. And a few announcements. So the first one is that the recordings for this particular session will be available on the page shortly, together with the slides and every other document that is needed for us to recall whatever we have learned here today. And also, I would like to remind us that the GIS platform also has a YouTube platform. It also has a YouTube platform where we can also log into whenever there is a CPD, not just from the Health and Science Working Group. And also, the Health and Science Working Group is also working on another CPD, which we will communicate the details later on the pages. So please keep checking on the pages for such news and updates. Yes, and for us who could not get our questions answered, like our chairman mentioned, we will definitely get the answers and then bring them back to you. And then the contact of our facilitator will be available in case you want to contact him personally for promotions or any business. You can just contact him when the contact is available. And finally, I would like to ask our facilitator if he has any comments so far before we draw the curtains.
Yeah, thank you, Portia. I want to thank everybody. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure sharing. I'm available to answer any follow-up questions. So you can reach out to Portia for my email. Thank you all.
Thank you too once again. Without wasting my time, I would call on GS Edmond Amwakon to give us the closing prayer. GS Edmond, please, are you here? Okay, so it seems GS Edmond is not available at the moment. So I'm going to call GS Gloria to give us the closing prayer.
Shall we please? I hope I'm the only Gloria here.
Yes, please, you are.
Okay. Shall we pray? Our Lord and Master Jesus, we thank you this day. We thank you for the gift of life and for the grace to be able to be impacted upon with this knowledge. We pray for our facilitator, whatever he has impacted onto us, we pray that you replenish him and grant him wisdom, knowledge, and understanding in his field of work. We also pray that whatever we've learned here will not only end here, but will continue adding on onto the knowledge for the betterment of our country, Ghana, and the world at large. In Jesus' name we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, dear
Amen.
Gloria. Okay, so we have